link to the Hangout.
We are live. We have begun. Terry is apparently on his way. Kristin, as usual, is somewhere in the background, probably just finishing off her hair or something. But we are joined by. Let's go in the order that I first added people to the event. So Jennifer was the very first I asked because I was sorting this out a couple of weeks ago, saying, "Jen, you've got to come on a bogus chat."
And here I am.
Indeed. And Paula, who, as most of you who watch this regularly will know, is a repeat offender, repeat guest. And,
thank you, Ammon. Hi there.
And we are joined this week by this guy who used to work for a search engine, but it wasn't Google. Can't think what it could be. Dwayne, pleasure to have you here, sir.
Thanks, Ammon. I'm going to send Cortana after you to kick your butt now.
I just wish you could somehow make the Windows machine stop reminding me that I can have a free trial of Windows 365. I know I can have Office 365. I've said no
Lord,
for a reason.
How do you think my retirement gets funded? Come on. I'm not going to support that request.
Terry and David, glad you could join us. But let me swing straight over to my regular partner in crime and start off the traditional way. Bill, what have you been up to this week?
Good morning. I haven't been up too much. I'm planning on going to a Wednesday morning meetup with a startup group in the area. It seems like San Diego's big in biotech startups, and it's interesting hearing all these people's stories about how they got started up over a cup of coffee on a Wednesday morning. So I'm looking forward to that.
Cool, cool. I think in Europe it works better in pubs. You know, coffee houses are all well and good, but pubs, that's where so much work has been done over the years.
Well, we've got a lot of coffee houses around here. Not exactly sure why, but
I blame Seattle. It just sends them all downwards. So that's not bad. Not bad start at all. Jen, what's your week been like? What's a typical week for you, or what's this week been like for you?
This week's actually been pretty crazy because I've just been down in California for the last few weeks, so I drove back and now I have like masses of emails and masses of everything all piled up that I was waiting for my nice monitor setup to do. So my week has been a lot of work.
Yes, road trips can be hell to catch up from.
I know, especially when you're working on a little laptop and ugh.
It's one of the reasons I stopped doing so many conferences and then eventually just almost stopped doing conferences altogether. Is it wasn't the time at the conference. You know, taking a day or two off isn't a problem. But when you consider the time spent getting a presentation ready, the time spent trying to clear work before you go so that, you know, you don't think your schedule's going to suffer too much, and then the time trying to catch up with everything afterwards, it just felt like I lost a whole week of time for a two-day conference.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, back in the day when, you know, way back when it was like the original PubCons and stuff, those were great because there was no presentations and we spent a lot of time just sitting around in pubs, like you were saying, and just talking SEO, like nonstop. And now it's definitely gotten away from that from what it was way back in the day. I still hope that maybe Brett will do another old school PubCon in London like there was, but that's been years and years since he's done that.
Yes. And it's a shame because I loved the original PubCon with no presentation, just pure networking. They were so good, and then it turned into a regular conference.
I remember the first, I think, 3 SES New Yorks that I ended up at. It was less about going to the sessions. It was more about going to the pub down the street in the evening.
Yeah. And the pizza place.
Yeah, and it was it was almost like a conference over a conference, if you will. You know, like you learned more between 10 a.m. and 2 a.m. or 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. than you did all day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that this very hangout is based on, is that so often the conferences, the real value is those chats that you can't predict. You never know who's going to be at them, but you know, one minute you're just going for lunch, and then suddenly you meet a couple of people, and the most phenomenal chemistry just happens. And sometimes that's the best bits of the entire thing.
That's exactly why I tell everyone at conferences, go up and speak to the speakers, introduce yourself. Don't worry about stopping them in the middle of lunch. Engage with these people, because everyone's going to respond. You're going to have these conversations, but you have to be opening to starting them. Because, you know, left to my own devices, I'll sit at the conference and enjoy lunch. But if you want to come and talk to me, I will talk to you the whole time and enjoy a quarter of my lunch. I can eat later, but forming the relationship and the connectivity and sharing ideas and solving problems, that kind of takes precedence over the turkey sandwich.
Yep. Yeah. Somewhere, Matt Cutts is watching this going, it was you that sent them.
Yeah. Exactly. Sorry you never got a meal there, Matt. Sorry, man. There was a whole plan behind that, right?
So, Terry, Dave, I know you've never been much on the conference scene because, you know, if usually you feel that everything's been done in the presentations afterwards, but of course you're both big on the hangout thing, so I'm guessing it's the same kind of attitude for you two, that, you know, it's the conversations that matter, not the articles.
For sure. Yeah, I never got much out of the conferences. That's why I quit paying to go to them. Now I only attended if I got invited and not paying, because I didn't see myself getting the value out of it, and quite often left, let's say, a little perturbed at what I had been presented with.
That actually brings up a really interesting point, Terry, which is, you know, are we going to see a point where the conferences start to flip, where there just aren't enough people who are willing to pay, but there's a whole ton of us who are willing to go speak? At what point does it cease to become a conference? And does it just start to be a group of us getting together again just to talk to each other?
And then we have old school PubCon again.
Right, exactly. Like, will we naturally get right back to that, where we started?
I really hope so.
I don't know. My world, I'm not even waiting for a conference, so, you know, I mean, I can hop on my Skype or on wherever and pull up a video chat with anybody, and most of these people, presenters, and talk to them personally about things I'm doing and sites I'm working on, you know. So maybe me, it's the Rolodex effect, you know what I mean? I talk to these kind of people every day of the week, all the time, and so to hear them give a presentation when I can just pull them up on Skype and go, here's a specific situation, what would you do, what do you think?
Yeah.
You know, having access to that, I think, changes my world, or at least my perception, you know, because even, again, we're live face-to-face here, which is great, because text, you know, things get lost in text, so you can see someone's eyes and see what they're saying, and so I think a lot of that changes it for me.
Well, even if it's just the scenario of, you know, you saw the PowerPoint on SlideShare and you had some questions and you wanted to talk to them about it, you get a vastly different perspective than, like, when I'm standing on stage and I'm presenting to the audience. You know, like, I have to factor in things like engagement, entertainment, are they going to get a message, am I hitting my timing properly? Like, these are big ticket items for me as a presenter. But when someone just calls me up and says, hey, Dwayne, I was looking through your slides and there's a slide in here that talks about this nexus point where mobile phones are no longer growing and other services are increasing, what do you think about that point? That's a completely different conversation. And that's actually the more germane conversation to have with people individually. And it doesn't happen at that conference level, unfortunately.
I think it's happening online in not only Hangouts like this, but I've really been participating in inbound.org a lot, which is HubSpot's community website. And for instance, this week they're having a landing page crew. So you can just submit any landing page, and whoever wants to will comment on it. And it becomes that group discussion that David was talking about, like, I have this situation, what do you all think? And I really like Inbound for that.
You know, it's
Well,
it's
you know,
funny
as
because
we always say, we believe there is no cookie cutter SEO. You know, I'm a believer in the school of Mr. Terry here that, you know, even if I have two clients in the same market, side-to-side competitors, they have different infrastructure corporately, they have different budgets, they have different teams, they have different people. Like, literally, if I'm competing for the same terms with a direct competitor, you know what I mean, head-to-head, I'm going to take a different approach to what I'm doing based upon what you're working with. Because if you're cookie cutting, like a lot of agencies do, you know what I mean, no names mentioned, but I've had to audit some of the known agencies in our field, and you look at it, and you can tell they're cookie cutter kind of SEO plug-and-play stuff. Whereas as a consultant, I don't really do that. To me, every situation I'm walking into is going to have different teams, different people, different structures, different budgets, et cetera, et cetera. And I have to work with that to be successful. And so, you know, I think that situational element of like you're saying, to be able to talk about my situation with someone, that's how someone learns better. And with the dojo, we have people that come to us, you know what I mean, and say, Dave, Terry, you know, or whoever, Frank Watson's there a lot these days, you know, ask someone specifically about a situation. You learn a lot more than just some sort of slide presentation. If you have, and I know you have to work for it and get yourself in there, but a lot of times if it's a more specific question or specific situation, the answer can be much more useful.
The issue with the cookie cutter thing is always part of the struggle of going from being a solo SEO to having a process. You know, the minute people want to scale up, they kind of need something that's replicable, and unfortunately, that can often come out as, you know, one size fits all stuff, which in marketing doesn't really work. You can do that with parts, but the whole strategy has got to be unique to the business because their marketing plan's got to be unique.
I am a big fan of this. Early on in my life, when I had my first consultancy, I was given advice by somebody who we all know, and I said, you know, how do I grow my business? And he said, templates. You don't create unique things for every single client. You create a template and you fill it in uniquely on behalf of each client. And that was kind of an eye-opening moment for me, because prior to that I was thinking, look, if these people are paying me $300 an hour, then, you know, like, they deserve all of my time, all of those hours. And it's exhausting. It just drains you, that type of approach. But what's amazing to me is how many people still follow this kind of thing. And I'm going to rant slightly on LinkedIn at the moment. You know, I had somebody ping me last night saying they wanted to connect on LinkedIn, and I said, okay, you know, let's connect. There you go. Within minutes, I get the pitch from them. Hi, Christian. Here are the services that our business offer. Blah, 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 blah. And I remember looking at it and thinking to myself, you couldn't even be bothered to change the name to my name and paste it in your pitch. Like, that's really bad, but it's also rampant today.
He was merely making assumptions about your religion.
Maybe. I hadn't thought of it that way. In that case, I'm glad that he didn't say, hey, Satan.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like, that could be an issue. And I said, okay, he's got a positive attitude. I'll give him points for that, all right?
I must admit, I hate most... I'd say 60% of my experience with people connecting on LinkedIn is exactly that. The minute that I've accepted, because I'm thinking, okay, let's meet somebody new, let's see, you know, what happens here. The whole thing we're talking about the conference thing, you know, where you never know who's going to walk into a conversation and how great it can be, and instead they want to sell me blog posts, or they want me to put up their guest posts. And
well, see, I don't spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Maybe you should have a templated snarky response. Yeah. Turn a fair play, man. Just
I've even tried
write it once.
My portfolio. I do
or
not.
Get Terry to write it for you.
Oh, you know, David just made me think of something. I should create a
Doug Heil by chance? No, sorry.
I should create a canned templated response that informs the person. I can just copy and paste it in. That informs the person that has pitched me in that manner, thanking them for their time and letting them know that I have signed them up for access to the new Tor browser, and that I have signed them up for a number of adult websites as well.
And then, no, the first response, you'd ask him to do a review of Make Money's Online, if anyone remembers that from the old days.
Yeah.
I'm not going to finish that domain, folks, and if you try to figure that out for yourselves, I wouldn't do it. Just saying.
I remember Make Your Site Sell back in the day, the original version of that as well. You'd be amazed, that's still a thing. It's still out there. It's been updated a couple of times.
Well, it's the original Rickroll, man. That was before Rickrolls. Come on, it was the original.
But I must admit, I am starting to think that maybe what I'll do is send them the robots text from the largest domain I have, and say, "This is how I respond to the other robots. How do you like it?"
Good one.
No. What you want to do, Iman, is tell them that you're in Nigeria, and if they can send their bank account information to you, you can help them out.
It's such a waste of opportunity. We can't tell our audience here about it because our audience here are real people who understand this kind of stuff. But
I'm actually a Damon.
Matt Damon?
Yeah, I'm just a cron job that started at noon today Pacific time.
Noon today? Yeah. Try and pretend you're that young. So, I have to ask, what has been the biggest adaptation of going from Microsoft to Bruce Clay? I mean, they're both iconic brands, but they're very different. Has there been any of that sense of poacher turned, gamekeeper turned poacher?
What?
Yeah, no, I think the biggest shift for me has been, it's twofold, right? One is putting my small business hat back on. I came from the world of small business, and at that time, it's not one hat that you wear; it's several. You've got to be very agile, jump around. I kind of joke, right? Because agile was a big thing when I was at Microsoft, and there was like daily Scrum meetings and all of these kinds of things. And I kind of chuckle now because I think, oh man, we're not agile. Like, it's not even close to what you have to do in a day. And reminds me that you really have to roll with it. Being an entrepreneur is a very different environment than having all of that air cover above you. And a part of that is dealing again directly with employees. I hadn't had direct reports in probably about 5 years, and so you kind of get out of that sink, and you have to mentally have horsepower available for dealing with human beings in your life. And there's a difference when they report to you and you work beside them. When you work beside them, it's like, wow, man, that is tough. Well, good luck with that. And they've got to go deal with the problems. When they're your employees and you work with them and you are dependent on them to make your business a success, you're much more vested. You're much more concerned about their well-being, down to the personal level, how it contributes to the business, helping people understand how their actions contribute to the business. And these aren't necessarily skills that are trained in everyone. I was fortunate. My time at Caesar's Palace, I learned how to manage employees. Again, at Microsoft, I took more training. But even then, there's only so much of it you can use because I don't work at Microsoft. I work for a small company in Southern California. The attitudes and the norms are different. The expectations are different. And every single day, I have to remind myself that while I'm giving guidance or asking for feedback, I have to be open to changing my own thoughts based on the norms in this area with these people, with our own company culture. And not everything needs to change just because I see a different way of doing it. And so it's been very eye-opening for me to kind of put that entrepreneurial hat back on and say, all right, how are we keeping the lights on this month? What do those numbers look like? Because, at Microsoft, that's like so not a consideration for 99.9% of the employees. It's just never going to be on their radar. When you're senior in a small company, like where the money for the coffee is going to be spent and how much of it is going to be spent is very much on your radar because you have to pay attention to the details. That is your commitment to all of your employees, is that you got the details so they can do the work and grow the business. And, it's exhilarating. I'm excited by it. At the same time, you kind of have that moment where you're like, holy cow, like, am I equal to this task? And then I drive home with the top down in my convertible in a beautiful valley where they're growing artichokes and broccoli, and there's horses out riding, and the sun is setting in front of me, and I'm like, oh, hell yeah, I got this. Because, all is good with the world.
Yeah.
And he's been doing a pretty good job of it, I'd say.
Thank you, Paula.
I've got you, Dwayne.
Awesome. Just full disclosure, Paula's team reports to me.
It's one of the things I was talking to a guy who's just starting out in SEO, and he was saying, what's something good to do for my career? And I said, honestly, go and work for an agency.
Yeah.
Because when you're a solo consultant, and if you haven't worked for big corporations, you don't understand big corporations. You don't understand their issues, what their roadblocks are going to be. An agency will help you get in there and see those, and they will tell you how they're experiencing those. And, I mean, obviously, you've got experience from both sides of that, both being on the outside as the agency, but also being in a big corporation, even, having your department and understanding the politics, the communication issues, and, of course, the need for kind of everyone's competing within a corporation, and that's what I think a lot of consultants miss, is that a corporate is more competitive than any other company, but it's not looking at its outside competition. It's all those interior...
Do you mean that by...
Yes, David, I'm making
what
fun
they
of it.
miss, as in... thank you. Do you mean that by miss, as in, so at the end of every year's budget, they hand you money for nothing? I miss that.
Yeah, I miss that too. Those are good days, right?
I literally had a guy in a large corp I was consulting with come to me one day and said, Dave, I got to get rid of 10 grand. Essentially, just give him an invoice and some report that went in the garbage somewhere. But literally, he had 4 days until budgetary review and all that stuff. So it was just like, yeah, I miss those days.
That happens, right? Like with a lot of clients, you have clients that are large enough where their budgeting and planning cycles and their fiscal cycles essentially require them to use their budget, or they can't justify it again for the following year.
Well, that's right, and someone on the team might lose a job, et cetera, right? And
well, there's knock-on effects from it. And so it's completely possible that those mid to large-size clients will literally look at you and say, they can't say, I need to spend $25,000, will you take my money? But they will say, what else can you do for me?
Yeah.
And that's the doorway where it's content creation and link pruning, and we have this service, and you should invest in this, and we'll do that. And by the way, you need another 600 hours of SEO work, because who doesn't? And
even further to his point, though, is that, again, understanding that corporate culture, because there's guys who do local, like Darren Shaw and stuff, and I wouldn't profess to ever be good at any of that. But I know corporate SEO and that kind of stuff and consulting to that. And what Ammon was saying goes beyond that, too, because the marketing director, the MD, is sitting here, and now he's got all these teams that are competing for budget, and they don't tend to work as smoothly with each other as they want because they're almost segmented, financially by budgets and teams and this and that, and there's not even a great incentive for the PR team and the social team and everyone else to work together at times, like the dev team and whatever. It's all, it's pulling teeth a lot of times in corporate structures to get these guys to work on the same page.
Yeah.
David, I'm going to say yes, but I don't know what I'm saying yes to, because my sound was all garbled. But it sounded eloquent.
Just nod. We just nod here. That's oh yeah. So we do. Anyways, all I would say, Wade, is that corporate teams aren't generally encouraged to work with each other because of these separate budgets and desires to keep their teams together and so on and so on. Often the PR team, the social team, the dev team, and everyone else that you need to work with aren't always communicating properly,
And the issue they have with so often being unable to share credit because the corporate structure is about rewarding the departments that are doing well, and they're just not geared towards shared credit. And one of the things I always say is, it's amazing how much good you can do if you don't care who gets the credit. in anything. I mean, that's my philosophy of SEO. It's not my job to look great as an SEO. It's my job to make the client look great as a business. I should be invisible. The perfect SEO is kind of like Kaiser Soze. You're not even sure he exists. You just see the effects. You know, the company's doing well and they've hired an SEO, and those 2 points you can draw a conclusion between or not. I don't care, as long as the client knows. But it's very difficult when working for a corporation to enable that to happen, because so many things do need multiple buy-ins. So often with a corporation, you've got a marketing director, and then you've got a head of digital. And so even within marketing, he hasn't necessarily got the whole departmental buy-in. And then there's the corporate above that. You may need to work with copy, who have to work with legal, who have to work with product.
And then you get C-levels that wake up one morning and just decide they want to go after something out of the blue because they want to now read everyone that one last week. Yeah.
Apparently we are not the only ones experiencing some sound issues, so it does look like this is a bit more Google-wide this time, so unfortunately it happens. Google does these things to test us. It's amazing how it is starting to sound like a religious thing, isn't it? Google is all wise and it does things to test us now. Jen.
Well, no, it's probably just this Hangout. Anything else, it's not doing it to.
Jen, you have one of the few publications I still really enjoy reading and don't feel like, oh, there's going to be wild speculation presented as fact here.
I try to avoid the speculation as much as possible, that's for sure.
How do you enforce that editorial control? You know, do you have to bounce back a lot of guest articles, or do you just simply go, do you know what? There's one way to have control. No guest articles unless I ask for them.
I have a few guest articles. It's not very many of them, and some of the fun ones are we have a column called State of the Industry where people get to spout off on whatever they want, and that's kind of their time to do wild speculations and stuff. But they have to be fair in how they do it. If they want to say Google's evil, okay, but you have to back up why Google is evil, and this is the reason why, and this is all the stuff, and blah, 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 blah. And so that's kind of kept a lot of the wild speculation down a bit. And for my own personal writing, I definitely try to avoid it as much as possible. That's kind of why you don't see all the wild, oh my God, is there a Google update? Maybe something's happening every, 2 or 3 days.
I was impressed this morning. I was reading Jennifer's SEM post, and she had this article about 301 redirects where she pasted in pictures of tweets where Gary Eish had responded to someone with advice. Oh, there's John Mueller. Perfect timing. and Jennifer, right on the heels of Gary's tweet, corrected him and said, oh, no, but if this is the situation, then what Gary just said is wrong. But she said it much more politely, of course. And then Gary responded, oh, that's true, Jennifer. And I'm thinking, what respect for this person who can intersect Google's mouthpiece there and make the stream flow right.
Thank you.
Hats off to you, Jennifer.
Thanks.
Yeah, it is a really tough one. I've got a hangout coming out later this, or rather a webinar for SEMrush, where we're going to be talking about the tendency in our industry for clickbait and speculation to run rife, and the need for editorial standards to really rise. I'm hoping for good things, but I must admit it's going to be a long, long battle there. I imagine that it must have been a frustration very much for, well, I know it is for you, John, because you are sort of target number one along with Gary at the moment for this stuff. But it must have been frustrating for you as well, Dwayne, when... I mean, I've seen people pick up Microsoft patents and talk about how Google is using this, you know, because it hasn't occurred to them that another search engine is doing cutting-edge research. And I always felt Bing got a really hard deal because some of the research was top-notch. You know, Bill and I are always keen on the patents, and particularly when you were looking at some of the things to modify the way of looking at things like PageRank. Nice. There were times when, you know, it just seemed Microsoft couldn't get a break with people's mindset. They just fixated on Google, and Bing didn't have a chance. That must have been frustrating.
As a Microsoft developer, I can tell you people love to hate Microsoft. Bottom line.
But they still use it all the time, so it's not necessarily representative of like.
Yeah, well they use gas all the time too, John. But everyone complains about the price of that. So.
Yeah.
I can't actually hear anyone. I did think I heard Ammon say the word Microsoft, and so I think my audio clarity issues might be working to my advantage. And
I'll
I'm just going
to in text.
to say that Microsoft is the greatest company in the history of commerce on planet Earth, and I think that covers all moments.
Yeah, I'll type it in chat while everyone else carries on talking.
Oh, lovely. Then I can't avoid it.
Oh, you should see the reaction when I tell them I surf with IE. It's like I'm a murderer.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, Terry, you're the one Microsoft is looking to shut down right now. Dude, seriously, take the upgrade.
I do. I have Edge, but prefer IE.
Hey, listen, I was part of the dog food for Edge browser, and I loved it. It's got a huge amount of promise. Then I went and bought my own laptop. I bought a Lenovo for myself at the store, came home, fired it up, and the first 3 times I tried to get on the internet, Edge just kept crashing. So I finally managed to get it up long enough to install Firefox, and then didn't use it for 6 months. And then a bunch of updates came out, and it became more stable, and I'm just like, holy cow, like, do I really have to give this a year and, like, let them stabilize on this thing? Because I like the browser, but, man, it was glitchy.
How long ago was that?
This would have been close to a year ago now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've done it since then,
as
and
you know,
I've never had
internet
problems.
years is a decade, you know.
Is it
Yeah.
still glitchy now for people?
Hmm?
I've gone back to Firefox because I have a bunch of plugins I use, so you know,
Oh, yeah.
it just makes more sense for me, right? I like to think that, you know, being an SEO, my version of the world is kind of limited because I can't use Edge because nobody supports SEO-ish plugins for it. So it's kind of a dead issue for me.
It's certainly been interesting watching the browsers over time, and I think there's always an aspect of that I'm aware of, because I think browsers more than anything tell you what people's real tastes are at any given time. And certainly the dominance of Firefox so quickly was because it was the first one that allowed us to really customize the way we want to access the web.
Mm-hmm.
That we could add in the tools we wanted, that we could adjust the interface in all kinds of ways, that, yeah, we could have skins if we wanted, but also that we didn't have to have a clunky email client with it, which of course some of the early browsers did. I think still that's what killed Opera, which was such a shame because Opera was a great browser at its time.
Well, you know, browsers are actually very useful for search companies because of all the data they can send back to the search engine. And as you can see, John agrees with me, smiling intently. So he must agree 100% with me. But there's a lot of useful data. I mean, you know, people think that the browser with the search box, that's where all the data comes from, and the lion's share of the data is actually from your patterns and your behavior and the places you're actually going on the web. There's a lot of discovery that can happen from there. There's a lot of information that can be gleaned. Patterns can be understood in millions of instances. I think that people just don't necessarily realize that, but it actually explains why there's so much back and forth when you get an update with Firefox. Why, now Yahoo's your default search engine, and now we're back to Google, and then we're over to Bing again, and it literally depends on who's check cleared and what time of year you're at, and that's when these changes seem to happen. But it's fascinating, the data that you can see through browsers.
Yeah. Well, it's different for Chrome and Google, of course, because with them it's just which company have they bought this week, rather than who's
Right.
check cleared.
Right.
John, I mean, it must have struck you as amusing at times that Google kind of does get credit sometimes for patents that we've seen from Yahoo, from MSN, from all of these other companies. It is that the minute somebody says this is a patent that applies to search, it must be Google.
I don't know. I mean, patents are kind of a bit theoretical, I think, in that a lot of that stuff is not necessarily something that's currently being used or that was ever used. It's just like, well, some of these researchers came up with this crazy idea and they tried to turn it into something and turn it into a patent. Doesn't mean that it's actually being used at the moment. Maybe it's waiting for the right time. Maybe it didn't turn out that well. So I try not to focus too much on that. I think it's interesting to kind of see what's happening behind the scenes there, but I wouldn't necessarily see that as being representative of what's actually happening. But I mean, what I like about search is that like Microsoft and Yahoo, Yandex, they all have different ways of attacking the problem, and it's essentially the same challenge, like trying to take this pile of documents and turn it into something useful for people to kind of look up. And they look at it in completely different ways, and they find some pretty similar results in the end. So I find it interesting to see, like, you can look at it in a completely different way and still get pretty reasonable search results out of it. And at some point, it's really hard to tell the difference between, like, who does which search results, that they're different, but it doesn't necessarily mean, like, this is better or this is better. It's almost at the point where you're subjectively looking at the results and saying, well, this could be okay, this could be okay. It's not, like, clearly wrong. They're pretty good.
Yeah, it's circumstantial.
Yeah.
I always thought that the difference between Google and Bing was kind of like the Pepsi challenge, but without anybody actually taking the challenge at times. People never even gave Bing the chance at times, which was a shame, because often I remember there was an experiment done where they switched the results. They switched Google for Bing, and as long as you put the logo on there, people said it was the better one, and it just was this weird kind of brand.
It's a habit, Amon. It's a habit, right? Google was really, really good for, we'll call it the first decade, and I mean this in terms of not the history of the company, but in terms of the history of search, of anticipating what somebody wanted and giving them a reasonable answer. And so that trained a generation of people to use Google. During that time, Google made some really smart investments, and they brought on some things that became very involved in people's lives. Android, Glass got a lot of play, even if it didn't really manifest very well. By the way, I still have mine. They're pristine. If anybody wants them, $5,000, I'll sell them. The advent of Chrome and these kinds of things, that's kind of cemented the reason why you stay with Google. So even at those times when, if there's been a fluctuation in quality of results, it's not, because it's a long game, a minor fluctuation for a week or two or even 6 months until a piece of the algorithm is figured out isn't that big of a game. Like, it's not a game changer at this stage. We're seeing all kinds of shifts that are happening. Marissa Mayer is getting a $55 million payout. It looks like they're going to be sold in 3 or 4 weeks. Lord knows what's going to happen with that. Baidu was raided this morning by Chinese officials because a student died who had done research on Baidu, went to the top result. It was not obvious that was a paid result, and the cancer treatment that they took didn't work, and they died as a result of it. So now Baidu is being held in this conversation as a point of responsibility, and where does that responsibility lie? You showed me the results. They should be trustworthy. This resulted in a death. Therefore, you're complicit in this. And, I can't help but think there's a lot of window dressing going on with that whole thing. And yet, that's the reality. That's the reality that media is talking about in relation to search. And when you get down to the average person on the street, if they ask their question and they get what is deemed in their mind to be a reasonable answer, then they will check off the box that says satisfied every time in that circumstance. It largely is down to it's a habit, don't make me re-examine it, don't make me think about it, and as long as you're not overtly failing me or harming me, we're okay to just keep moving forward. And, that's an extraordinarily difficult thing for Bing to overcome, and it's very smart for Google to have recognized that they reached that point and then started activating other ways to cement themselves in people's lives, because that's how you prove your value. That's how you keep that loyalty in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I must admit, I'm one of those ones. I always felt Microsoft missed a trick. They missed part of their branding. One of the things people have against Microsoft is this idea that it's so corporate that, that's the company, they've had an antitrust, they're all about the money and the business. I think if they had focused on being the business search engine, if you're interested in shopping, if you're interested in business stuff, finance stuff, this is obviously the engine that knows you better. Yeah, if you want to know about college kids and playing on skateboards, go to Google. But if you want to know about business from business people, come to Bing. I think that could have actually really worked.
This is not a bad approach, except you're way wrong. Here's why. Okay? That's a great way to waste $100 million right there. Here's the reality of it. And don't get me wrong, this is the kind of critical thinking that goes on every day at these companies, and it's important, and you have to look at things from both sides in different ways and all of that. But the reality of the internet is we all understand the concept of head and tail, obviously, but the reality is that the search engines have to follow the head and the tail. So we think of tail in terms of the long tail queries that only get a couple of queries but generate a lot of aggregate traffic over a period of time. The search engine, their version of head and tail is a little bit different. So there's head, so things like entertainment, things like celebrity, things like movies, things like breaking news, sports scores, stock market information. That comprises the head. That's where most of the query information and query activity is happening on the internet, is in areas like that. And then the tail is everything else. So selling that set of golf clubs, that's tail activity on the internet. And so when you build your search engine and you actually position your search engine, you have to understand that actual split on head and tail, because you don't put resources into chasing that tail. And unfortunately, Ammon, a lot of the business type stuff is in that tail area. If you could aggregate around the world, take all of that business, and one company owns all of that, yes, completely sustainable, billions of dollars, fantastic. But that's not realistically ever going to happen. And so that means that if you're still fighting for a slice of the pie, well, then you got to step up and fight for a slice of the big piece of the big pie, not the small one. And that's ultimately one of the main driving factors on focus. This is also why we see things, tools get deprecated, because they don't align with that higher value area. And so they are a net loss cost to the business, so then the business has to prune that out. It's why we see some areas get a lot of lift versus, we could have a problem in the algorithm that's having an impact negatively on scores of long-tail results. And it might take a year to get that fixed. But if that starts to impact the head results, like we saw when there was an update and Google was putting a lot of Wikipedia stuff at the top, that was corrected very quickly, because that was having a detrimental effect on searcher quality, on their experience. And so that was dug into immediately, focused on, and corrected. And so, you know, depending on where it is, there's that tolerance. And I know, John, I love you. I've been there. I know the actual answer to all of this is we take it all seriously from stem to stern. And I completely agree with that. That is a legitimate perspective. But the fact of the matter is, when the dollars are spent and the resources are allocated on doing specific pieces of work, and you're the project or product manager who has to justify it, part of your justification is going to be how big the space is that you're targeting with this portion of a solution. And that doesn't happen on the tail end, it happens on the head end. So there.
It's one of those. I think to an extent we're going to have to kind of agree to disagree on this, because while I do see a lot of companies who fixate, look, it's all about what slice of the pie you can get. You've got to fight for the pie. Sometimes there is this pie sat to the side that nobody's looking at, which is 3 times the size of the slice you're going to win by fighting tooth and nail. And sometimes I do feel people, you know, leave the low-hanging fruit to fight for the one that the rest of the pack is all going for. I have seen a lot of niche search work very well. I've seen a lot of niche business work very well. And I sometimes think that the best way to get into, when you've got a company that's just dominating like Google, I don't think you can fight on the same space. I think you've got to have the wedge. I think you've got to find the chink, build in that niche, and then widen from there.
So I'm a huge fan of niche search. In fact, if I thought there was a niche that I could exploit by starting my own search engine, I'd happily go off and do that. I mean, we all know what cost per clicks look like, and I could make an immediate retirement off of half the cost of Google CPCs on some topics and be quite happy sucking in that revenue recurring on a monthly basis. You know, the fact of the matter is, to start up even a niche search engine these days is not inexpensive. It's not like you can just go out and get off the shelf. You can go get an off-the-shelf algorithm to start from, but you need to put a lot of work into refining that in a hurry, because the expectation now is much higher, and that's as a result of the money spent by companies like Google and Microsoft. And I think, you know, there was a decision made years by Microsoft to get into search in a meaningful way to compete with Google. They invested in it. It's been probably a longer and harder road than originally expected. But once you start, you're either all in or you're all out. That's kind of the way it works at the big end of search, if you're not focusing in a niche area. And so I think it would be a pretty big kick in the pants for Microsoft to just say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we're going to dial back. We're not going to be, you know, a real public search scenario. We're just going to focus on what businesses need and nothing else. You know, that's kind of a rolling over and showing your belly moment. And I don't know anybody in that company that would be willing to do that.
Yeah, I agree totally with you there.
You don't think at some point, Dwayne, that they'll get out of search entirely?
No, they won't. And Terry, here's why. The data that search brings in is so critically important for all of the rest of the services that will serve us in the future. We'll lose the 10 blue links, we'll lose the search box, people won't go to Bing.com or Google.com in 20 years. What they will be doing, however, is they will be doing voice search on their devices, on their wearables. They will be doing proximity search, where when I come into an area, results will be pre-programmed and ready for me. So when I ask my device about anything related to my physical location, it already has done those queries and brought that information forward so it can answer me instantly. When we reach that stage, all that data's got to come from somewhere, and that comes from the crawlers, that comes from the search, that comes from websites being better, that comes from schema.org markup, it comes from all of these things that we're wrestling with today. And so the value of that data the surface hasn't even been scratched yet, which is why nobody's going to get out of search, Also why it's extraordinarily expensive to get into search in a meaningful way these days. Because if you're a niche player, you got access to none of that. You're going to top out when browsers go the way of the dodo, and you can't really get any more money out of paid search on mobile devices. When that nexus point is reached, you have reached your end of days as a niche search engine. You have to have the data flow. You have to have the integrations. This is why search has become the big brand play space, because they have the hardware, they have the software. If they don't have the hardware, they have the partnerships with the people who have the partners or have the hardware, so they can get their software on it, so that their data can flow to the end consumer. That's why search will continue to perpetuate, but it's going to be vastly different.
How much do you think an advantage does Google get by having AdWords over this much smaller program that Microsoft has?
So I'm only getting part of that, Terry. I know you were asking about AdWords, and am I correct in thinking you were applying that around the smaller footprint of mobile?
No, just I've always felt that Google had a big advantage over the other search engines because of the amount of data that they're pulling in from paid search.
Yes. So it helps to think, John, close your ears, it helps to think of Google not as a search engine but as an advertising company. And so if you approach it from that perspective, then suddenly everything becomes clearer about why they do what they do, how they do it, and how the data from search kind of plays a role in that, obviously. In the early days, we all kind of lamented the fact that you would do a query and you would see a public service announcement as an ad basically on the page, right? Because nobody had paid for that. Indeed, when Bing first launched, there was still some legacy issues with that, where there were queries in Bing that nobody had paid for advertising on, and so you wouldn't get an ad that would show up there. I always found it slightly oxymoronic that in order for you to have an ad for some queries, there already has to have been an ad on that query. Because I thought, well, then who the hell starts the ball rolling? Like, didn't make any sense to me, but it was what it was. And so, there's this very fine line, and Bing and Google both, actually all of the engines have to manage this, which is the paid keeps the lights on, and we know that that's how we appease our actual commerce partners. But then human perception is the other side of this, the squishy side of this, where humans are more likely to say, well, we're distrustful, nebulously, randomly. We're distrustful of anything that's paid. The example out of China with Baidu, where this was a paid ad that was in place, and the family followed the link and went and got the services, and their child died. And it's like, well, it's a paid ad, and it's called out as a paid ad. But, culpability aside, we've seen a lot of that happening, some of it for legislative reasons, a lot of it, though, from a purely, I guess, usability standpoint, that the engines understand that it's good business to call those things out, because that has to have an impact on lowering the amount of fraudulent clicks that are happening, not because somebody's trying to defraud anyone, but simply because somebody didn't realize they were a paid ad and they clicked on it, then got there and went, oh, it's not what I want, and they come back, and then the advertiser is being charged for that cost per click, but it doesn't convert, so they're complaining, and the engine has to refund the money. And so if you manage that side of it, then you end up in a scenario where those ads are ostensibly better called out. And this is why you see the experimentation. How close to the line can we actually get at the engine between having it be that integrated experience where you can't tell the difference versus, well, we actually have to call this out from a legal perspective, a usability perspective, a satisfaction perspective. I don't know. I think, honestly, if we could have the search engines be completely open and honest with us for 30 seconds, one of the things that would be admitted to us is that if there was an opportunity to go to a fully included, paid-only search results page, would they take that opportunity? And I think the answer is yes. You're running a business. You have to look at those opportunities. And if the searcher is satisfied with your search results and the businesses are happy to pay to be there, then you could make the argument that a pure pay-to-play space is the only thing that's needed. It doesn't address the data side, but you know, we figure that out afterwards, right? But right now, you know, we're not ready to make that kind of swap. The engines aren't able to make that swap right now and continue with the level of engagement that they currently have.
I'm one of these people. I mean, people have biases. And I think one of our jobs is always to kind of challenge those biases and teach people better. There was a time when if you owned a diner or restaurant, you would not have a coloured person serving the food because you'd lose a lot of patrons over that. That needed to change, and that only changes by, you know what, we're going to have whoever we want serving our food, and if you don't want to eat here, that's fine. I think there is a point at which the search engines need to just label advertising, and let the quality over time speak for itself. I believe that the biases will change, that if people have a good experience with advertising, and you've really made clear that this is advertising, that's going to change their mind. But as long as we're kind of minimizing the level of exposure, oh, well, it's an ad, but we're only going to declare it with 2 letters just tucked in the side here, I think we're missing a golden opportunity to change people's biases.
Well, listen, Ammon, you want to start this whole thing up, I can move to DC, you can pay me to be a lobbyist on your behalf, and, you know, we'll see what we can do.
But I do think, you know, look, site owners, we have to, when we put advertising on a site, we do have to make it very clear. I sometimes feel that AdSense makes everyone else declare Google's ads more clearly than Google search results do.
Yep, for sure.
And that is a little strange when you think about it from a UX point of view, even if nothing else. And I just sometimes think, do you know what? Put the word advert or advertising by those search results and let the result quality speak for itself. People will click on them out of pure curiosity. And sometimes because there's a lot of places where, do you know what? Those pay-per-click guys know what they're doing. They have crafted a very good title, a very good description. They know how to get a click-through. They know exactly what it's going to be showing up for. Let them do their job. And, you know, it would get rid of a lot of the problems at the moment that certainly Google's had in the EU. And obviously this Baidu thing as well is where they're kind of saying, well, okay, it may have had some sort of significance, but did the user understand this was advertising? And there is this little challenge because on the one hand, we want to declare it as advertising because it removes it limits our responsibility for it. You know, well, it's an ad. It's not something our algorithm has picked up necessarily. You know, we're not in total control over this if it's bad advice, blah, blah, blah. We kind of want to have the declaration there to get out of trouble, but we also want to not have it there so that we get more clicks on it and make money. And there is that duality. I think sometimes we've just got to bite the bullet and say, do you know what, let's just declare it and wait. Because I really do believe that this will sort itself out quite quickly. It's like TV ads. Most of us, most of the time, don't really enjoy the ads. And then there's always that one that's running that you actually want to see because it's a damn good ad.
Mm-hmm.
We don't hate all TV advertising. We just hate banal advertising.
Oh, I don't know about that. Personally, an ad comes on, I change the channel till I find something that I want to watch. I hate ads. I make my living like that, but I do most of my TV watching Netflix.
Terry,
I don't want to look at ads. Be pummeled with sales stuff. I don't buy anything. I have
Terry, there are moments with advertising that get into the very spirit of our times. Terry, what's up? And instantly you know the ad because it's stuck.
Yeah, that's true too. But I could tell you, I watched the baseball game, and the same ad plays twice between innings, and now I just sit there and talk along with the ad, repeating it, changing the words to see if I can make my brother laugh.
I want that on film, bro. Sorry. Just saying, that's a viral video right there, man. We're sending it to whoever you're bitching at. I'm sending that in because Terry would be memorable. So there you go, Ammon. It would work.
Okay, well, we are at the hour, so we're going to start winding this down. Let's do a very quick lightning round, please, of what we're up to this coming week. Bill, what you got coming up this week?
Look, like I was saying when we started talking, I'm going to be involved in meetups with the local startup community to learn more about where people are talking about investing and growing technology. Want to know more about the local startup scene here. I don't know it very well, and I want to know more.
Cool. I'm going to go along my film strip of the way I see it. David, you're next. What are you up to this coming week? Obviously Friday.
Yeah, other than the hangout, nothing terribly happy. A bunch of stuff I'm working on, including another forensic job, so some poor bastard's losing his life savings. And it's falling through the bottom, and for once it doesn't look like it's Google or anyone else's fault, mostly bad programmers and bad decisions of people he hired. And so he's going to lose his mom's house, and I'm trying to save it.
Yeah, always a tough gig. Dwayne, what's your week looking like?
Let's see. First and foremost on my plans is finishing this sandwich that I started before the hangout. So that's the first most important thing in my week. Obviously I'm up to my eyeballs in client meetings, in solving problems. I am still up to my eyeballs in unpacking after our recent move down here to Southern California. I'm looking forward to going to another restaurant this weekend to try out dining experiences in the greater LA area. That seems to be a hobby of ours on weekends now.
Cool. Jen?
I am going to finish doing catch-up, and then I'm going to start transferring the SEM post over to Secure, which will make John and Gary really happy because they keep harassing me about it. It's been months now, and they're like, why haven't you done it yet? I'm like, I'm sorry. So that's on my roadmap for this week and next.
Cool. John?
I don't really have that much planned. I was on vacation the last 10 days, so I'm trying to dig through my inbox without drowning.
John, you're among friends. It's okay to tell us that you're releasing Penguin this week. It's okay, man. Go ahead.
Kristin?
No.
Well, I'm working on the analysis end of the new free coder, or the new coders survey for Free Code Camp. And I'm the new coder, so they're like making me feel really nice, saying your views are important, and so because I obviously can't do a lot yet with all the organizing of the data and everything, but it's super fun to be in there and see everything that they're doing. It's a great process.
Yeah, you've got to get involved with things to learn them. Sometimes you've just got to get in there and get your hands dirty. Paula, what's your week looking like?
I'm working on keyword research and really marveling at how much queries change from one year to the next, and optimizing some of our older blog posts that are still really valuable and useful for people and driving traffic, but may not be the newest date that we want or have the most up-to-date information. So that's kind of my focus.
Excellent. It was nice to see one of the oldest Susie chat inspired ones turn up the other day. Really nice.
Exactly. That's where that came from, was my research into what are our good blog posts that are still out there and valid and attracting people, useful.
Cool. Terry?
Let me see. This week I'm doing a bit of development and writing a post as part of a white paper on why U.S. companies should come to Canada.
Good luck.
So
I think you'll get pretty
off
good
with-
traffic
does it
there, like
start
after the election.
Start off with if Trump gets elected, or
Yeah.
Exactly.
If Trump gets elected, we expect a lot of business.
no, we're going to be building that wall for him.
Look at him.
Right, I'm going to take us off here. We'll probably carry on chatting in the green room, but thanks for joining us, everyone. See you again next time.